मेरे को बजट का कुछ
Namaste
दिखाना
and
था।
greetings. I, Sana Ansari, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान नई दिल्ली, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Talk. We are gathered here for panel discussion on Environment and Union Budget 2025 and 26 as part of IMPRI's 6th annual series of thematic deliberations and analysis of Union Budget 2025 and 26. This discussion is organized by the Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development, IMPRI Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, as part of IMPRI Web Policy Talk series. I welcome all of you to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for tuning into this discussion. Now let me introduce the esteemed gathering. Our chair for the session is Professor Krishna Raj, visiting professor IMPRI, Professor Center for Economic Studies and Policy, Institute for Social and Economic Change, Bangalore, India. We welcome you, sir. The distinguished panelists for the session are Mr. Soumya Datta, co-convener of South Asian People Action on Climate Crisis in New Delhi, Professor Sami Malamani, Senior Advisor, Wash and Waste Management, CCDC, Center for Chronic Disease Control, former professor at National Institute of Urban Affairs, New Delhi, and also a visiting professor at IMPRI. Mr. Deb Aditya Sinha led Climate and Ecosystem, Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, New Delhi. Ms. Pratna Bora, Independent Advisor to Environmental Startups, and Mr. Himanshu Shekhar, Senior Editor, Political and Current Affairs, New Delhi Television Limited, NDTV, and also Senior Visiting Fellow at IMPRI, and Ms. Bhavreen Kanderi, founder of Warrior Monks. Welcome everyone. We look forward to learning from our esteemed gathering. Now, without any further ado, let us start the program. To begin, we have a brief presentation by Dipangshi.
Should I start?
Yes.
Namaste to all the eminent panelists. As we all know, the environment isn't confined to a single ministry. It's a shared responsibility. The Union Budget 2025-26 recognizes this interconnectedness. Today, we'll explore the key environmental takeaways from this budget. Let's take a look. Renewable energy is a priority. PM Kusum gets 2,600 crores for solar support for farmers. Critically, PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana, the world's largest rooftop solar project, receives a massive 20,000 crore and 80% increase, while wind and hydropower allocations are reduced to 500 crore each. Coming to India's national nuclear mission under the Department of Atomic Energy is receiving 20,000 crores for R&D in small modulator reactors. The goal is to have at least 5 indigenously designed SMRs operational by 2033. To further boost nuclear energy capacity, amendments to the Atomic Energy Act of 1962 are proposed. These changes aim to attract private and foreign investments, ultimately achieving 100 gigawatts of nuclear energy by 2047 as part of India's clean energy strategy. The Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has received a budget boost rising from 3,330.37 crores to 3,412.82 crores. Key increase include Commission for Air Quality Management, now at 38.98 crores. The CPCB also sees a rise to 126 crores. Finally, National Zoological Parks budget has nearly doubled to 44.32 crores. Agriculture faces budget adjustments. The overall allocation for agriculture and allied activities has been reduced by 5,042 crores, now at 3,71,687.35 crores. The Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana also sees a significant cut of 3,621.73 crores. Despite these reductions, the government is pushing for sustainable agriculture through the PM Dhan Dhan Krishi Yojana, focusing on crop diversification and improved irrigation in 100 districts. The National Mission on High Yielding Seeds, with a 10,000 crore allocations, aims to develop over 100 climate resilient seed varieties, emphasizing long term agricultural productivity. Now, coming to the Ministry of Heavy Industries and Public Enterprises, who is the prime driver of the National Manufacturing Mission, which receives 100 crores. This funding is strategically targeted at boosting domestic production of key renewable energy components. This mission strongly supports clean tech manufacturing, aiming to build a robust domestic ecosystem for these vital components. Furthermore, custom duty cuts on critical minerals, including cobalt, lithium, and others, will provide a significant incentive for EV and battery manufacturing. Turning to blue economy, maritime development receives a substantial 25,000 crore. This will support substantial coastal aquaculture, mariculture, coastal ecosystem restoration, and shipbuilding repair industries. The fishery sector itself gets 2,703.67 crores, a 3.3% increase, with 2,465 crores specifically from PM Matsya Sampada Yojana to enhance productivity and sustainability. The Deep Ocean Mission received 600 crores focusing on Samudrayan project for deep sea exploration. The Ministry of Finance, specifically the Department of Economic Affairs, is developing a taxonomy for climate finance. This standardized classification will guide investments in climate friendly projects, streamlining funding for both mitigation and adaptation efforts. For sustainable urban development, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs has allocated 4,000 crores for green infrastructure. Main focus is on sustainable mobility with EV infrastructure and a focus on metro systems and energy efficient housing. The Ministry of Tourism is also promoting green energy in tourism, specifically in eco-sensitive zones. The National Critical Mineral Policy under Ministry of Mines focusing on National Critical Mineral Mission. This mission addresses India's reliance on other nations, primarily China, for critical mineral assets vital to green tech. With 34,300 crores outlay over 7 years, the NCMM will encourage Indian companies to acquire these assets abroad, enhance trade with resource-rich countries, and develop domestic stockpiles, thus diversifying supply chains. In conclusion, India's vision of Viksit Bharat hinges on balancing development with environmental sustainability. This budget offers hope, particularly with the solar energy boost, though we must consider the ecological footprints even the renewable energy sources carry. As yesterday's panel on cities and local governance highlighted, urban climate action remains a key missing piece in this budget. From polluted rivers like Palar and Gaggar to climate impacted agriculture, the need for environmental protection is clear. Cases like MC Mehta case and largely unimplemented reports like Gadgil and Kasturi Rangan remind us that enforcement and implementation are crucial. Now, it's time to see if this budget truly delivers on its promise for energy sustainability and self-reliant India. With political will and collective action, we can achieve Viksit Bharat by 2047. The time to act is now. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank-
Dipanshi, for your presentation. Proceeding further, it's my honor and privilege to invite the Chair, Professor Krishna Raj, to start the program with the Chair's opening remark. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sana and Deepaksi, for providing an overview of the budget and also set the panel to move ahead. I welcome all the distinguished panelists for this very famous and also very impressive online discussion organized by the IMPRI through the Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development. Let me put a context. Union Budget 2025-26 is presented in the context of the economy, Indian's economy in terms of GDP. The growth has come down from 7% to 6.4%. And further, it has been forecasted by IMF that the growth rate may be reduced further. The government of India, as a blueprint for the next 2 decades, on the one hand, it wants to enhance the GDP growth rate and also per capita income in terms of high income country, or in other words, we call it as Vikasit Bharat by 2047. from middle income country to high income country by 2047. It wants to realize that goal. On the other hand, the government of India has also set another important milestone or target to realize net zero emission by 2070. At least by 2050, it wants to reduce all the greenhouse gas emissions uh, to the 2005 level. These are the two policies which contradictorily moving ahead, but somehow the budget tries to make a convergence between economic and environmental policy in terms of allocation of resources and announcing of various programs to address the issues of climate change, address the issues of environment, and also address the issues of various other sectors, including agriculture, industry, and also transportation sector. Of course, urban sector is the one of the key sector for mitigation of greenhouse gases. In this context, I am very happy to chair this very impressive panel. It tries to highlight various programs initiated by the Union Budget 2025-26 and how much the fund has been allocated for various programs that would address the need of the country in terms of environmental conservation and management. So the program, if you look at the various programs, the flagship programs announced in this budget is that mitigation programs have been highly prioritized in terms of production of lithium within the country, that is battery, basically to electric vehicles in India, and customs duties have been reduced. On the other hand, the promotion of nuclear power plant has been given priority. Of course, there are other mitigation programs in agriculture sector. Just now, the Deepaksi has mentioned. Those programs would also help some extent to bring address the climate change mitigation issues. Overall, the union budget tries to give an impression that it wants to realize sustainable development in terms of mitigation and adaptation to climate issues. And on the other hand, it wants to enhance the GDP growth rate and per capita income. So the total allocation, as mentioned by Deepaksi, it has slightly increased from 3,330 crores to 3,412 crores this year. Is a small percentage increase in terms of 2.5% increase in the allocation. And there are the programs which address the issues of climate change, issues of sustainability, and issues of environmental conservation. We have seen in recent time is that on the one hand, the coal production will continue in the country and also along with thermal production. Further, the mitigation activities in terms of afforestation, you might have seen a recent report by the Forest Survey of India. A huge tract of forest has been depleted. So in terms of quantity, but more importantly, in terms of quality also, the forest has been deteriorating. So in order to address the mitigation, we are almost promoting the technology as a solution. But if you look at EV, electric vehicles, their charging They are using basically the power generated by the thermal, coal, basically, and other sources of energy. And that will swap the energy which is produced somewhere else, and it has been used in the cities. But the pollution in villages and other parts of the country will continue. So is this a sustainable solution, electric vehicle or EV or even solar energy, for example, because we are using lots of solar panel and that generates lots of heat also. These are these are all the technological solution the government wants to achieve mitigation through technological solution. But most importantly, the forest and the biodiversity, water, and also the other important natural resources, even land, ocean, that play an important role in mitigation of the greenhouse gases, a natural absorption of greenhouse gases. So those understanding in the policy is very important in the budget context. The second approach is that the mitigation has been given highest priority over adaptation. This is the another way we can understand the budget. In what way, in where we are moving towards green transition, that is also an aspect we need to discuss. So I stop here and I welcome all the panelists to debate around the programs allocation and also other important issues to be considered for the way forward. May I invite first Professor Syamla Mani to provide your inputs on the budget connecting to the environment. Madam, you have 8 minutes, but I will caution you or ping you around 7 minutes so that you can conclude by another. Is it okay?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
Yes, yes, madam. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Professor Krishnaraj, I definitely agree with you that this is more of a growth budget, and it looks like, the government is really focused on the fact that, so many people have commented about the GDP growth and the growth rate, which has gone up and fallen and, not enough and not sufficient. And I also, have been trying to hunt through the budget to find whether there is anything. I mean, like what you mentioned, those items are there, but and also the presentation that was done. But it doesn't reflect the fact that we are in a kind of a different situation in the world, and especially in countries like India, especially being so close to the equator, and there are so many of our states which are facing so many of these issues. Like you rightly pointed out, it is a if at all there is anything in the budget, it is more towards mitigation, highly if at all. Although, like you also said, when you continue to emphasize on the not only just the coal production but the entire fossil fuel subsidies, the renewable energy doesn't have a chance, because it is very difficult to ignore the explicit implicit subsidies and then try to go for renewable energy. Like you said, that there may be some specific schemes, like they have said about the the Surya program, and that Surya Ghar, and for the houses and all that. But like many people have pointed out, how much is the real impact? Is it will it really help us to meet that kind of targets which they are trying to project? Even atomic energy, it has got, I mean, if you are, if you really do a proper think through, you also have to see what are the, not just the environmental compensation, but also that, what are the kind of infrastructural arrangements that you have to make, when you give such a big push to things like nuclear energy. This is, we have gone through this whole aspect, even in the 90s, that, so many of the nuclear energy programs could not really go through entirely because of this very fact that, finding land for burying the waste or any of those issues, like compensating people, whose lands are taken away, or even, what is the impact of, when you either mine for whether it is lithium or any of the minerals that they have mentioned. There is, of course, a huge, push in this budget for the minerals mining also. But when you talk about environment and the budget, what you would really like to see is whether there is a kind of a proper association. That is, what are the kind of impacts that this kind of push will have, and what is the kind of mechanisms that you have to do so that your program will actually go through, even if it is a mitigation budget. And I feel that some of these many of these projects, whether it is solar or, of course, wind, this time has in fact lost out. It has, in fact, the budget has been reduced, and some of the other cases also, the adequate amount of, like, for instance, I'm largely from the waste sector, and last year we saw quite a big push for biomass based, like biogas and Satat program, and how to link PNG, and like somebody pointed out, the urban aspect of how to link waste management. And this year there is absolutely nothing on it. So even if it is a mitigation budget, or even if it is a budget which is, promoting EVs, electrical vehicles, and the batteries which are required for it, and also mining and minerals, so that we are self-sufficient. It doesn't doesn't have a think through, according to me, because for instance, there are also ways that, last year also, the year before also, there was a lot of emphasis on how we can do electronic waste recycling, so that, some of those rare earths and some of the minerals which we require for increasing manufacturing in the electronic sector, even for the electronic vehicles, we would have ways of finding it. This year, I find that there is absolutely no integration whatsoever between some of these sectors, which would have actually also led to, and there is no, obviously, everybody has mentioned that there is no mention of unemployment and how the, how they are going to, there are so many potential, like, for instance, we consider, at least in the urban sector, so many waste workers. We are not just talking about only waste recycling in terms of plastic or paper or something like that, but even in the e-waste industry, I mean, if you really do proper skill development, and there is, of course, a huge case for just transition. These are the kind of places where we could have actually linked, renewable energy with, just transition, with utilizing urban workforce, and also linking it with, waste management, and several other urban programs, which were all started in the last I would say, 10 years, but there doesn't seem to have had any integration. And even the Jal Shakti and that
Madam, 7
program.
minutes are
Yeah.
over. Yeah.
So there also I find that it seems to be all in separate silos, and most importantly being also associated with a health organization, Center for Chronic Disease Control. I would say that the most important thing about adaptation, we are finding that state governments are now feeling really nervous. There are so many state governments which are themselves trying to say that heat is a very important problem that they are going to have. Floods and drought and rehabilitation and sanitation. There are states in which whether it's Tamil Nadu or Kerala or Odisha or so many other places, or even Assam, where flooding has become such a big problem that we are not able to go ahead with sanitation and even water, the Jal Shakti Yojana programs. So I feel that there should have been much greater emphasis that now that we have crossed the 1.5 degrees Celsius increase, that adaptation and along with mitigation and especially rehabilitation, prevention, and much bigger funds allocation for safeguarding the population and getting them to be much more resilient. That is what I would have expected from this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shyamala, for your beautiful explanation about how these policies impact really on the meeting the targets, and how the infrastructure has been in place to make these programs more successful, and also addressing the mitigation and adaptation issues. And most importantly, you took us to the some of the sectors which have been grossly neglected in the budget, including the waste sector, waste management, and also, of course, the waste management, including how these batteries will be managed in the coming days, especially in urban areas, if that waste will become a most important challenge for managing, that will be having lots of carcinogenic effect on the health of the people. And without having a clear picture on waste management, we are certainly encouraging the EV phase that may not end up in many disasters. Thank you. You have covered several other things. I am not in a position to summarize, but I will come back. Thank you very much. Now I have a pleasure to invite Mr. Soumya Datta, co-convener South Asian People's Action on Climate Crisis. It is your turn, Soumya Datta. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Professor Krishnaraj, and thanks IMPRI for organizing this like the last few years. Let me start by saying a little harsh comment that this government is absolutely not serious about environment. In fact, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, the name sounds good, but it has become a Ministry of Environmental Clearance or fast environment clearance. Let me also put some figures in perspective. People are saying this budget has increased. The Environment Ministry has got 9% increase from the revised estimate. But as Dipangshi's presentation also shows, the original allocation last year was 3333. From that, there is a 2.5% increase in the absolute term. But if you account for 5.35% inflation, the budget has actually gone down, because the inflation in the urban areas probably is a little less, but rural areas. But overall, it's around 5.25, 5.3% inflation. So budgetary allocation has been cut for the ministry. The second perspective that I want to give is this budgetary allocation of 3,400 and roughly 13 crores is roughly rupees 23.45 for the whole year for each person of India of 145 crores. So you are spending, or you plan to spend 23 rupees for every person, knowing that 90% of Indians are exposed to very high levels of air pollution, that around 60% of Indians face some kind of climatic extreme event or climate impact every year. And in this, roughly 70 to 75 crores of people who has to work manually in extreme heat index condition, and heat wave is not the most lethal condition. Heat index is the most lethal condition. And this government also knows, because the Ministry of Arts Science, which you can also consider that in some way it contributes to the knowledge building in the environmental sphere, given that the Ministry of Arts Science brought out this report on the climate impact in June 2020 over Indian region. So given this scenario that you are spending absolutely little on environmental aspect, let me also quickly give some comparisons. The allocation for under the Ministry of Home Affairs to transfer for Ladakh. Ladakh has roughly 2.5 lakh population. Presently, maybe 3 lakh population. And transfer to Ladakh is around 4,692 crores. That's 1.555 lakh per person. Transfer to Lakshadweep is around 2.35 or 25 lakhs per person. And the environmental allocation is 23 rupees per person for Indians. So there is absolutely no seriousness. And the question of air pollution is extremely serious. Recent study by the CPCB showed out of 500, roughly 521 rivers, 320 were very badly polluted. And these were under rivers. All the inland water bodies are equally polluted. The other large impact that is coming, and Professor Shamlamani also mentioned those, but I will go beyond that. The number and intensity of cyclones over the last 15 years, particularly in the western coast, has gone up by nearly 100%. And these are actual data, not projections. The intensity of cyclones have gone all over, but the number of cyclones, particularly in the western coast and the Arabian Sea, has gone up by 100% from 2008 to 2023. And this is, again, I'm saying this is actual data. There is absolutely no allocation for sea level rise, cyclone, salinity ingress, all of these, salinity ingress, loss of coastal land, and these are happening in increasing rates, beyond which the temperature rise and acidification of the oceans is also impacting the livelihood of all coastal people. And these coastal people in India, from 7,500 linear kilometers, there's a very substantial number, roughly 15 to 16% of the Indian population lives close to the coast. That is the coastal influence zone. So that's a very large number, even if you don't consider the 145 crores. Next, let us come down to what are the critical areas this government, and let me also put a little bit of a counter view to the presentation that has been made, and also some of the comments that has been made. Like just as a point, like Professor Krishna says, this government is targeting to reach the from middle income to higher income. The entry level for higher income today is $14,000 plus per person per year. We are at 2,700. If you calculate 22 years to reach 14,000 plus, and that by that time 14,000 will be much higher, then you come to over a 10% GDP increase every year, well over 10%. We are around 6, just around 6, and even that figure is very questionable because of the data fuzzing. So I think we are never going to, in this century, it is extremely difficult for us to go into the high income countries. This is the government should know, because these are plain statistics. Let me come to the other ministries that you can connect to environment. People are pointing out that added allocation to nuclear energy. Nuclear energy, if we look at even indigenous, so-called indigenous reactors, the Chutka, Fatehabad, the 1400, 700 into 2 megawatt reactor, 3 years ago, the budget was 21,000 crores. It has increased to 25,000 crores. That means per megawatt cost for today, the lowest cost nuclear power plant comes to around 17 to 18 crores per megawatt cost. Whereas for solar photovoltaic, it comes to 4.5 crores. Even for coal, it comes to around 5.5 crores. So I don't understand how a nuclear power plant can also support a sane budgetary exercise. Beyond that, nuclear power plants are extremely polluting in terms of radioactive leakages, radioactive gases, and not only for accidents. Nuclear power plants every week they have to vent out the radioactive gases which are the product of uranium 235 fission. This is not about accident. This is normal operation. They have to leak out the low level radioactive liquid water contaminated with radioactive element, and that is generally discharged. And again, this is not accident. This is a normal operation. So
Soumya Datta, you have taken 7 minutes. Just
okay. So last point is that the other point, renewable energy, the cost is much less. The environment impact, everything has an environmental impact. If you have to live a very frugal, reasonable life, you will have to have environment impact. And there are n number of studies of externalities, external impacts, which shows wind energy has the least impact in terms of electrification. But in India's case, I'll just end with these two observations. We have not started the transition. We have not started the mitigation because our fossil fuel energy base is still increasing. So we have not started the mitigation. Only some of the additional demand is being made by renewables. So that needs to be very clear. Second, I'll highlight this again. We needed a very substantial allocation for adaptation programs and resilience building programs. We needed to be first doing vulnerability mapping all across India for the vulnerable geographies and vulnerable communities. And based on that, we should have supported our state climate action plans. All the states have their second version of climate action plans. All of them are lying
Soumya
defunct.
Datta, we come for that once way forward.
Thank you.
In the way forward, we will discuss all these
Yeah.
things.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Soumya Datta. You made it very clear that the allocation is completely or grossly inadequate to meet the targets. And if you take inflation into consideration, actually the budget is less than the actual budget allocated. And you have covered these various issues, including how ministry is functioning. It is basically, you titled it as a Ministry of Forest, Environment and Climate Change as Environmental Clearance Ministry rather than preserving, conserving and managing the environment. It is well taken. Your point is well taken. And also you have highlighted several other issues, including the electric vehicles and also the questioned the production of nuclear plants and establishment of nuclear plants, given their radiation accidents and also their sustainability in India. So you have also really come out with the per capita expenditure in terms of environment. It is grossly inadequate. That is 23.45 rupees per person in India. This clearly shows that where we are heading in terms of environmental conservation. I thank you very much for your impressive presentation. Now I will move on to the next panelist, Mr. Debaditya Sinha, lead climate and ecosystems, Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, New Delhi. Debaditya?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, very much. Yeah,
Okay.
please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, IMPRI, for organizing this talk since last 4 or 5 years at least. And after hearing previous post speakers, they have already highlighted the issues, and I fully agree with Soumya Datta sir also. Like, the priority of ministry is, if you see the action, like, the mandate is fine, conservation of environment, wildlife, and taking action for climate change. But if you talk about the action, so budget gives you some indication. So it is important. First thing is that you can see in previous 2 years how much money we have been able to spend, even the budget, whatever we have demarcated for particular actions, how much we have spent. Secondly, how much priority we want to give to certain areas. Now, and this has clearly connection with the policy of the government and the amendment in laws which we have seen in last 2 or 3 years. they have been all targeted at ease of doing business or like, in generating more, I will say profit. Because as the data, income and employment are still a bigger issue. And if this is a result of the most of the companies in last 2-3 quarters, they have been very dismal. So the focus of the government has been to increase the profits of companies, and this inflates. So if we talk about the biodiversity and forest and wildlife, clearly we can clearly see that in last year we have not been able to spend a significant amount of money which was demarcated for conservation of wildlife. So basically, the budget there is a heading for the development of wildlife habitats. We have budget for NTCA. All these things are there, and this can fairly give you an indication, like how much we have spent. So. We all know that in the last 2-3 years, the Project Tiger Elephant was merged. We have closed some institution and then we merged to some institution to save the budget. And in the era of climate change, I think we also need to talk about the new threats, which are now very regular. For example, coastal erosion or the forest fire. Okay, these things are also used to be talked. Like we cannot just say climate change and we don't talk about this nitty-gritty. So these are very important. And I was surprised to see that, uh, last year we were able to spend only 36 crores out of the 50 crore, which was meant for forest fire. And this year it is, and also for the National Coastal Mission, we have been hardly able to spend just 8 crores out of 50 crore allocated on the National Coastal Mission. And this year the budget is just 2 crores. So you can imagine, last year it was 50 crore, we spent only 8 crores, and this year the allocation is just 2 crore. So this is, I don't understand, because 2 years ago, this whole mystery screen and
Hello, Devaditya, have we lost connection? Hello. Can you unmute Devaditya?
Sir, your voice is not audible.
Can you unmute Devaditya?
yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah,
Now
now you can go ahead.
Okay, can I hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Right. So there's some technical issues. So this budget is very, like, if you see about forest fire and coastal conservation, the government is not serious. It is very, very clear. And also, if you see the budget of National Tiger Preservation Authority, although we are critical of the functioning of the NTCA, the way they're operating, like, extending their jurisdiction from tiger to cheetah and all this thing, which are not a great priority. But even if you see the budget which was allocated, they have spent very less amount of money. And same for if you see the thing called Interim Development of Wildlife Habitats, there is significantly less expend on that front. Now, there are 2-3 things where they have done great. I think this grid-based solar energy has witnessed a significant boost in terms of implementation, because last year the budget which was actually approved, it is nearly double we have spent, and this year the budget has increased several times. So this Kushal Yojana and all these things. So I think this decentralized solar, we are doing great. Also, last year, if you remember, we again verified the National Green Hydrogen Mission as an alternate fuel for transportation. But as this budget, we have not heard much about it, and it was just, we came to know from this budget document that we only spent 50% of what was the original allocation in the thing. One more important thing which I want to highlight here is that in the budget for wind and hydro has also slowed down. So, and we all have been like saying that, wind and hydro is not alternative to clean energy, because wind has significant impact on the land and the biodiversity, which was livelihood. Similarly, hydro has several issues. So in that way, I think the decentralized solar power implementation is better. But I think again, as we say that, the focus is on GDP, and some one speaker was saying that thing. I think this is unfortunate part, because we see GDP as the basis of development. The GDP is only production. It doesn't take account the environmental cost, social cost. And if we keep GDP chasing the GDP numbers, then obviously the focus will be consumerism. And if you increase consumerism, then the efforts to actually conserve and will be less. And this we have also seen the case of this zoological park, and in the presentation, you always said this thing that the budget of zoological park has increased. At the same time, the budget for biodiversity conservation ecosystem has actually underspent in the last 2 or 3 years. And the reason is, like you can see in the last couple of years ago, this forest amendment bill came, which actually amended the Forest Act to exempt certain activities, and zoo safari ecotourism was one thing which we clearly also mentioned this thing in the we submitted to Parliament also, Joint Parliament Committee, under challenge in the Supreme Court also, that zoo safari ecotourism are not forest activity, but the law amended it and they allowed the states to build zoos, big townships. Like zoos doesn't mean like, small things. It's like big townships planned inside the forest. So I think the focus has been developing, you commercially utilizing this thing.
Mr. Debadityo, I think his connection is lost again. Debadityo? I think he has lost his connection. Shall we go ahead with another panelist? Shall I invite another panelist?
Yes.
Yeah, that would. I think you may be given opportunity in the discussion also. Now, let me welcome Imansu Shekhar.
Sir, he will join a bit late. He's covering speech.
Okay. Now, shall I invite Prarthana, Miss Prarthana Bora, Independent Advisor to Environmental Startups. Prarthana, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Please.
Yeah, thank you so much for accommodating and for inviting me, Professor Krishna and IMPRI. So I have been listening to the comments, and I of course agree with Professor Mani and what Mr. Soumyadatta said, as well as what Deboditya said. But I wanted to bring in a different kind of a perspective in terms of the budget, and I primarily work with industry, startups, small industry. So I think, what I'd like to bring is the angle that the budget, kind of brings forth from an industry perspective. And if you look at it from an industry perspective, this is very, very decarbonization driven budget. And I think it's not so much of about the environment anymore, the environment that we talk about, but I think it is very much driven by an industrial narrative where, which benefits what is happening in the global space to make our industry more competitive. So I think, some observations, I don't have a detailed, I don't have a lot of detail, but if you look at it from the decarbonization narrative, the top 250 odd industry, the listed industry, between 2021 and 2022, if you look at the percentage use of renewable energy, it increased from 5% to 9%, which is very little. And much of the discussion in the industry is because on the supply side, how do we make this RE, whether it's hydro, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's solar, whether it's wind, how do we make it accessible for industry to kind of enable the transition, not just in the operations and increasing operational efficiency, but also in the supply chain. So I think the move to expand nuclear capacity is driven by an industry need, and soon we will be looking at regulation that will bring the private sector in. So I think, that's an observation that I see, having been in the ground and working a lot, intensively with industry. So I think the transition to bring in nuclear is actually because of the commitments that we've made overall in terms of our 2070 goal, and because of the pressure that we are facing now to advance that goal, because 2070 is a very long-term goal, and I think at some point of time, India is looking at, a leadership role as far as pushing the agenda of renewable energy. So I think the transition to renewable energy is driven. I'm not in a position to say whether it's good or bad, but I think the thought process is to enable the industrial decarbonization faster. And it's actually not so much about protecting our environment as much as it is to meet the decarbonization narrative that is being driven by the industrial and business community. So that's point one. The second is, I think it's a very pro manufacturing budget, and again, because of my work in the industry, I think the reason that it's a pro-manufacturing budget is because there is a lot of global regulation now that is coming to monitor our industry, and we need to figure out how to address those regulations, because I'm not talking about the top tier industry, but if we look at our small, medium industry, we look at, unlisted companies, we are not in a position to develop competitive competitive products for the global market. And I think that is one of the reasons why the domestic manufacturing push is being encouraged, and there is allocations for startups as well as allocation for the small and medium industry, because it's more about helping develop products which would be competitive in domestic markets or in the global south, because of the regulatory environment in the global north. And I'm not saying that this necessarily means that we'll be developing clean products, but hopefully, if we have the right kind of push, then we could use this incentive to look at clean technology, clean products, clean energy transition. So there is a positive and a negative, but I mean it's how the industry looks at it. But what I'd like to really say is that it is essential, because otherwise the small industry is going to be in a very crucial in a crucial mess because of the global regulatory environment. And my third point is on what Shamla talked about in terms of waste management, and I've been in this in this transition where we talked about waste management, and which is moving to circularity. So if you look at the budget, again, industry driven terminologies and more focused on circularity. So if you look at something like the allocation for ship recycling, which is actually in some way what we used to look at from a perspective of industrial waste management, but now it's more focused in reusing that material. So I think it's interesting, because ship recycling is something that is again a very strong global narrative because of it, and globally also everyone is struggling to look at decarbonization net zero strategies for the ship industry. And I think the fact that we are looking at ship recycling and it has a separate mention, is something that probably also aligns with the government of India's, you know, strategic action plans for decarbonizing the steel industry, because that is one of the net zero decarbonization plans that is almost ready, and we will be we begin to implement it, because we are taking a different kind of a narrative based on our 2070 goal as compared to the the 2045 2030 global global net zero targets. So I think these are some of the thought processes that has gone into the budget. I'm not been part of the discussions, but it's my guesswork, because I've seen the industry interests and where the industry is facing challenges. The positive side probably is the allocation to the drinking water mission, because again, I feel there is an industry push there, because water security is a major area that industry is now talking about. And there is a lot of drive from companies to go in, get to become water positive. So I think there is a link there.
Prarthana, you have taken already 7
Yes.
minutes.
Yeah, just one more quick point. The sad part is where it moves away from not following the global narrative and the global need for industry, is the focus on nature, which is going to be the next big thing in the business environment. So I think, there the budget really misses out, because we have cut budgets for biodiversity conservation and nature conservation activities. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Prarthana, for your industry perspective is very much required, and you have provided a detailed industrial perspective on the union budget. I completely agree with you that the decarbonization narrative, whatever the government has, but it has little impact on the use of renewable resources. It just increased from 5% to 9%. And most of the industries are facing the problem of efficiency and how to replace the present technology with the renewable energy use technology. That transition is not very fast to reach the carbon transition goal to 2070. And clearly it shows that the leadership role is very important in order to address the climate change issue. I really enjoyed your presentation, and it gives a different perspective from the industry perspective. Of course, you have spoken many other issues, but let us take them back, bring them back in the discussion. Thank you, Prarthana. Now I move ahead and invite I think Imamsu has not yet joined. I will call Miss Bowri.
I have joined, sir.
Oh, you joined? Thank you, Imamsu. Please, Imamsu Shekhar is a senior editor, political and current affairs, New Delhi. He is part of the NDTV programs, and also is visiting senior fellow at IMPRI, New Delhi. I have been listening to him, and his perspective is completely different. And I welcome Himamsu for your brief presentation.
That's right. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. A very brief presentation, in fact. I did report extensively on budget, and unfortunately, the focus largely has been on the personal income tax rate restructuring that has happened. And that shifted focus from some more critical issues that should have been debated and discussed. But first, what is the allocation that has been made essentially for the Environment Ministry? Is around a 9% increase in budget allocation that I see, because when FM had presented the budget last year, she had allocated around 330 crore rupees. But subsequently it was revised to 3,125 crore. And this time she has given 3,412 crores. So it's roughly a 9% increase in budgetary allocation for the ministry, which of course is very critical for India's battle against climate change and institutionalizing the idea, the vision of sustainability in the governance structures in our development projects. But interestingly, there is a lot to talk about, and there is a lot that was not mentioned in our speech. In fact, I just interviewed the chairman of Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs, Mr. Agarwal, Sanjay Agarwal, and he was very categorical that budget outlines a vision for the green mobility transition, which has been a focus area for the government. And if you just look at the list of items on which the customs duty have been either reduced or completely slashed off includes lithium-ion cells, and the entire focus has been on reducing the customs duty on all the components and products that are used to manufacture batteries for both mobile phones and electric vehicles. And this is part of a larger long-term strategy to make India a global manufacturing hub. So a lot of announcements on green mobility transition front as part of India's big drive to combat the impact of climate change and also promote and propagate clean technologies. Secondly, when it comes to agriculture, we heard a national mission on high yielding seeds the government has decided to launch, and it includes development of climate resilient seeds. This is part of government strategy to make the Indian agriculture more climate resilient. And I've been visiting different farmlands in different parts of the country, doing ground reports. And if there's one thing that I hear in Bundelkhand and also in Uttar Pradesh, in Modi Nagar and other nearby areas, is the fact that the vagaries, the changes, the frequent changes in the weather pattern is actually affecting farmers' cropping patterns. So I think government has decided to launch a national mission on high yielding seeds, and it includes development of climate resilient seeds, clean technology manufacturing. This is a point that I already mentioned, and this of course includes the focus area. One of the focus area of manufacturing mission is furthering Make in India, the development of ecosystem, as I said, of solar PV cells, EV batteries, motors, etc., to ensure that we make a much speedier green transition in the country. The second thing, solar energy got the highest allocation, 26,549 crore rupees. Focus, of course, has been on rooftop solar with PM Surya Ghar Yojana, and the announcement of a nuclear mission with the aim for 100 gigawatt of non-fossil fuel based energy by 2047 is, of course, a big push towards harvesting clean energy beyond solar energy, etc. And as I said, commitment to India's clean mobility and energy transition, expanding EV ecosystems, and of course, but there are questions on the lack of financial support in the climate adaptation sector. Remember, whenever there is a pollution crisis, we hear that government has a plan. There is a hearing in Supreme Court every year in November, December. Presentations, affidavits are filed, and we are told that farmers are being encouraged to use technologies to ensure that they don't burn parali. And parali management, of course, has become a very critical issue. And the government, of course, has a game plan, but we don't hear any allocation for encouraging farmers in Punjab, Haryana, parts of Uttar Pradesh, even Madhya Pradesh, so that they can use alternative technologies to deal with the parali residue that they burn, eventually leading to a huge pollution crisis. River rejuvenation, again, in elections, we hear a lot about the pollution in Yamuna, but again, the reflection that we expected in the budget on cleaning up the rivers and rejuvenating the river ecosystems, there was not much emphasis that we heard. Of course, we need adaptive technologies, we need more investments, more subsidy to provide cleaner technologies to farmers, to deter them, to encourage them to move towards a better option of destroying parali. But that additional allocation that I personally was looking at, because through series of affidavits, government has been saying that we want farmers to shift towards much cheaper technologies, we'll give them subsidy. But of course, that would require a lot of financial allocation, so that the farmers can access cleaner, better technologies to destroy parali. But that there was no mention on that. So air pollution, river pollution, lack of financial support in climate adaptation sector. These are some of the things for which I think we'll have to wait and see. The budget debate has started in Lok Sabha today. The debate on budget is expected to start in Rajya Sabha tomorrow. And I'm sure that lots of questions will come, lots of amendments will be moved, and we just should hope that a lot more will be done to address the challenges that we face, because as I've always been saying, that we are living in an age where there is a rise in the intensity, the frequency, the scale of disaster incidents. And last 1 year has been no indifferent. The heat wave crisis that we faced this time was unprecedented. And I remember at one time, the Mungeshpur area near Delhi Haryana border reported 55.6 degrees Celsius. It became a big international story. I broke that news, but later on the IMD department withdrew that data. But of course, we saw unprecedented heat wave. 2024 has been the hottest year on earth, and the frequency of disaster incidents are rising. The weather patterns are changing. We have seen farmers struggle with it. So I just hope that there is more informed discourse and discussion. And the narrative is essentially on making India more resilient, climate resilient, will definitely get more focus. I mean, lots of work is happening. And I think I'm just looking forward to this big budget debate that has started today in Parliament, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Imamsu, for your making a very clear, focused discussion on the how weather patterns have been swiftly changing, and that has resulted in increase in the uh, uh, temperature level. It is as high as 55.60 degrees Celsius. It is alarmingly very high. And with this alarming climate, how farmers can do the agriculture without adaptation to some new technology, especially climate resilient crops. And this is certainly there is no focused uh, plan or budget allocation for the nearly 60% of the farmers in India. They depend on agriculture as a source of income or a employment. That really increases the crisis in India if we do not address that very important issues. Thank you for making your points very clear. Apart from others, other points also you have made, and I will come back on the other issues. Now I request the last but not the least, Miss Baviran.
Bhavin will
Bhavrin
be having some
Kandari
connectivity,
is not there. She's not there.
having some connectivity issues. She was here. I'll just check
Uh-huh.
with her. We can go for second round, Krishna sir.
Okay, okay. Yeah, thank you, all the panelists, for making your views very clear. Let me provide you some a framework. This budget 2025-26, as some of you has mentioned, it is more into mitigation rather than adaptation. That clearly says that the mitigation programs are more technology oriented than the natural way they can address this issue. Of course, the adaptation has been received no mention except some Pradhan Mantri productivity increasing schemes in agriculture sector, identifying the sector agriculture districts which are having low productivity in agriculture production. That is nothing to do with climate change or climate resilient agriculture. My question to some of you is that every year the government announces the budget and comes out with some allocation, comes out with some programs. But overall, there is no reflection, there is no review of policies. And some of you has mentioned that allocation is different, and the revised estimates are different. And also there is a gap in allocation and spending. And that has resulted in misuse of resources, or the resources not being properly channelized for the purpose in which the programs have announced, like that. Further, the the whole, if you look at the whole climate change issue, the just transition, it means that the poor people, what role they can play, how they are being benefited in the whole episode of green transition or the climate change transition. So these issues are really very important to address the poverty, access to various resources, including housing, water, and access to forest, access to other resources. Thi- Therefore, how you can analyze the gap in the allocation and spending, and also how just the transition can take place with this type of allocation. One can think over on this issue, and those who are interested can come forward. Otherwise, I can call one by one, and you may take 2 to 3 minutes to make your points very clear. Shall I go by the same order, or shall I, some of you can come forward also, that is also fine. Otherwise, shall I call
I can,
Shyamla?
yeah, I can
Shyam.
make some, yeah.
Yeah, yes, Shyamla, please.
Yeah. So, as I was saying, even in the first round, that
Hmm.
this the fact that the urban, especially the urban poor, and the policies which had been announced in the previous years for urban development or the urban poor, or even policies regarding how to accommodate as you were saying, the poor, and how that actual just transition can be brought about. What we notice is that there's a kind of swinging kind of policy. Like last year, there is something, and then there is no follow up, and then this year there is something completely opposite. And also, you can see the kind of policy development also that is happening. For instance, Prarthana brought out some very significant points about the industrial aspects, and the way the budget might have looked at what is the global compulsions that we may be having, and how we need to promote the various facilities that industries, especially the small and medium industries, they need to do. But and then also it was spoken by many people about urban mobility. So you started all with last couple of years in the before that you wanted to make it biomass based, as I said, like that was pointed out, or even hydrogen, and also green hydrogen. All these are actually connected with the sector which I spoke about, the waste management sector. And especially the segregated wet waste, which has been shown in cities like Indore, where they have been able to make, Asia's biggest biogas plant, and also the entire urban mobility in cities like Indore is completely based on CNG, bio-CNG, and various other things. And bio-CNG has been utilized also in many small and medium sector industries. And so what you need to do is you need to also do investment in the grid development, and also the storage and various other things like that. I mean, you cannot, and today if you see, that particular policy has been completely abandoned, and there is no going further. So nobody knows what to do with that. And on the other hand, the waste management policy is completely changed, and now they are trying to, in fact, make it more incineration oriented, more mixed waste. And in fact, those poor people, the urban poor, which would have highly benefited with that policy on segregation, not only that they would have been given employment, and poverty would have been reduced. But also the fact, like I was trying to say, that they have skills. And we are not only just talking about, some plastic and paper and glass and all that. We are also talking about, as I said earlier, to change the entire scenario of urban mobility, giving them that type of jobs, which is to do with biomass based. Also, like I said about, electronic based recycling, and several other, items which are there, even for green hydrogen, and several other things where their skills and their also their numbers, we forget, that can be utilized. And instead of that, abandoning that and going towards something like nuclear energy, where you don't have the infrastructure ready, is going to leave these people in the limbo, because they are the ones who are actually suffering. They are forced to live besides extremely polluting mountains of garbage, where the water is highly toxic and full of heavy metals. They are breathing extremely toxic air. And and they cannot be utilized because their productivity, if at all, will go down. So it's not only the farmer who is going to face these kind of issues in the rural areas, but it's
Yes,
also in
yes.
the urban sector that these people are going to be facing. And instead of increasing productivity, all the productivity is going to go down.
Yes, Professor Samla, thank you for making the people's perspective and also farmers' perspective, how the climate change should have been addressed, keeping in them in mind and livelihood issues. Thank you. Um, are there any questions? Are there any audience who are participating online? They can ask questions also in between. Otherwise, if there are no questions, I will go ahead with others. And one more issue I would like to flag for discussion here is that uh, Government of India in its green transition or transition towards low carbon economy, they have mentioned that lifestyle changes for environment. That is basically bringing the behavioral changes among the various sectors, among the people, how these lifestyle changes can take place without proper policy or allocation of funds in terms of alternative resources, or say for example the organic farming and organic foods which are available in the market at a affordable price. More importantly, affordable price that will make sense when we want to buy a green products or organic products. They should be accessible to everyone. That they should be affordable. So how government can make a policy to make these products available at a affordable price, reasonable price, that will make the people to buy and change the lifestyles as per the environmental requirement. Are there any views by the panelists which
Yes,
can
I can
deal with
respond to
this
some
type
of
of
the.
issue?
Can I respond to some of the first points you made?
Yes, yes, Soumya, please make it
See,
within 2 minutes if you.
so nobody is nobody is complying, so maybe a little more. But let me first say we have very clear. We all most of us talk very vaguely about transition and just transition without
Mhm,
understanding what is transition is. In the last
mhm,
150 years, particularly in the 19th century, we had three transition as human society. So we know what are the parameters by which you can measure whether you are doing a transition or you are just adding something. By that measure, the whole global society is not yet transitioning. The total primary energy that India consumes, 81% still comes from coal, oil, and gas. 81% after nearly 20 years of programs, etc. We are doing good. Where programs, solar and all have been increased. But look at the other point that you mentioned, life. I was there, in fact, in the COP in Sharm el Sheikh when Prime Minister announced that lifestyle for environment. Look at what we are doing. Just adding some solar will not change lifestyles. On the one hand, you have to look at the supply side. On the other hand, you have to look at the demand or consumer side. On the consuming side, one of the major areas is transportation or mobility. Over the last 10 years, 15 years, we have been increasing our aviation infrastructure, the number of airports, the number of aircraft companies, the number of aircrafts, people exploding. An aircraft travel and air travel emits 7 to 8 times as much carbon dioxide than a good fast train travel per passenger kilometer. So this is an action which is completely opposite a transition. Forget about a just transition. Second, we are still expanding our coal infrastructure, both mining and coal power plant, which is completely against a transition. Forget about just transition. So the other way for looking at it is, yes, this could have been done. The solar that has been done, I welcome the government's push for rooftop decentralized solar. That was that, and somebody said that has performed very well, which is not true. That was still now the worst performing amongst the renewables. That's why this additional funding is very good, because if you recollect, when 100 gigawatt solar, target was 60 from utility scale, 40 gigawatt from rooftop, and we ended up with 7.5 gigawatt from a target of 40 gigawatt. So that was one of the worst performing renewable sectors. So last 2-3 years, the PM Surya Ghar and additional funding for that, this is a welcome change. And the problem is elsewhere also, because the implementation, the DISCOM, distribution companies, are actually the bottleneck. And we have worked with large number of villages and villagers who we wanted to give into solar, but their DISCOMs are really a bottleneck. But that apart, giving a budgetary push is welcome. But look at every other sector of demand. The lifestyle that we are pushing, given the national cooling program, it is focusing exclusively on air conditioning, whereas passive cooling and passive heating is almost completely absent. If you go for air conditioner based national cooling program, then your energy demand is going to skyrocket. Even in summer in Delhi now, 45% of the electricity goes into cooling. So in one hand, it's very nice sounding thing, lifestyle for environment. What this government is pushing is actually lifestyle for destroying the environment. And not the last
Thank
point
you.
is, the last point I want to mention, 2070 or 2060, these are meaningless, laughable targets. Already we have crossed annual temperature of 1.6 in 2024, though the 20-year average has not crossed. By all predictions, by 2040, that target, that red line will be crossed, and then some of the feedback mechanisms might be triggered off. So 2060 or 2070 is completely meaningless target. If we really have to do something about climate, along with pushing the rich countries for much faster action, we ourselves also has to focus on our own needs, particularly the communities and the areas which are very, very vulnerable to climate change. If you look at Himachal, look at what happened in Kerala, Himachal 23, Sikkim, all across the country, massive amount of impacts are happening. And the government is not really responding with any preparation. They are just responding with post-disaster knee-jerk responses. And that needs to change dramatically.
Thank you. Thank you, Imamsu. And the issue we are be discussing about the budget is that last year, before last year, I think there are some of the energy transition measure, including hydrogen, green hydrogen, was one of the issue they wanted to address. And the second one is that solar energy, rooftop energy, the second one. And third one is that pushing electric vehicles as the transition measure. But in recent times, you might have seen after Trump came into power in USA, the first and foremost thing he did was that he has withdrawn is countries' consent to Paris Agreement. So if you look at this geopolitical change and also the no agreement with the Paris Agreement gives an idea that the countries once again they are switching over to high carbon economy rather than low carbon economy, and whatever programs they are announcing in COP and also various other programs, they are not in line with sustainable development goal also. So on the one hand, the world is moving towards high transition given the leadership by the Trump. On the other hand, the sustainable developmental goals are becoming meaningless. So this will add cost to the society in terms of energy intensity. And as Imamsu and others have mentioned, sorry, even Soumya Datta has mentioned, the frequency of the cyclones, both in the Arabian Sea as well as in the Bay of Bengal, being a tropical country, it is increasing and it is affecting our agriculture production and farmers and also livelihood of the millions of people in the coastal areas. You might have seen how the Chennai has suffered a lot in recent times. So why the governments, including the USA and also Indian government and other governments, they are not paying adequate attention to the problem of climate change, the problem of environmental degradation. If you look at um, uh, the pollution in New Delhi, and people are silently suffering from high particulate matter, suspended particulate matter, which has crossed even 600 parts per million. So the governments, with their policies, whether they are going for economic welfare of the people or they are mandated in this way, and why they are not in a position to take the opinion, collective opinion of the people in addressing the both developmental issues and environmental conservation. Anyone can comment on this issue. The way the governments are approaching for economic development, they are silently killing the people in terms of environmental pollution, imposing cost on the society.
Just one point I want to add, sir, here, Himanshu.
Imansu, please. Your
Uh,
voice is a little feeble. Can you close to the
yeah,
mic? Be
yeah.
yeah.
Can you hear me now? Is better?
No. You have to earlier you were fine. Now I think your voice is a little feeble, weak.
Okay. Still not better?
Now it is better, but
Better.
still
Okay.
you can add
It's
close to
important,
the mic.
the point that
Be
you
close
made.
to the mic.
Yeah. The important point that you made, you just look at the global effort to combat the debilitating impact of climate change. The Sustainable Development Goals, as you said, of course, we are far behind the target. I had the privilege to meet UN Secretary General on the sidelines of the G20 summit, and he was very categorical that climate change is running much faster than we are, and the global community, despite all the commitments that were made in the Paris Climate Conference and then also in the SDG summit that was held in the UN headquarters, those commitments are not being kept. Now, the outcome is not only limited to disasters. I just want to share one important fact with you. The Indian Council of Agricultural Research has prepared a report that in the wheat growing period in India, that is between January to March, the average increase in temperature in next 15 years is expected to be around 2 degrees Celsius. And the report says that if that happens actually on the ground, the wheat production is expected to decline by 5 to 7%. Now, this is something very, very significant in the context also of the food security challenges that India will face because the population is rising. We do know there is a free food scheme which is in force since the COVID period, March 2020, almost 5 years now. And the number of people who are dependent on free food grain scheme, of course, is very, very high. So the challenges are not only on the front of the losses that we are incurring from disasters, but even the food economy is expected to be affected more and more at a time when the population would have increased much far more in next 15 years. So the question that you asked, the answer is, of course, there is a lack of commitment. The second is the role of state government is very, very crucial. We do talk to government officials and they say that the center alone can't fight this battle. But what are the states doing on the ground to actually address these challenges of climate change, of the impact of changes in the weather pattern, on the cropping pattern in states? There is not much active, serious action happening on the ground. In Uttar Pradesh, I've done ground reports where farmers would say that nobody comes to us to talk to us about the losses that we have to incur because of unseasonal hailstorm at some time, and then the temperature rose, I think, in February 2022, which actually had a very bad impact on the wheat crop. So I think the challenge is becoming more complex, and the commitments that nations have made at the global level that they don't seem to be working hard, and that is the reason why every summer we hear is the hottest summer ever recorded on Earth. And 2025, of course, will not be any different from 2023 and 2024. So the challenge is growing. We all know where the problem lies. But as you said, there is a problem of commitment, especially by on the part of the big developed nations like US, for instance. And I remember when Trump won the elections, when I interviewed environment experts here, there was a lot of disappointment in terms of the kind of policies we know that Trump has been pushing for, especially the coal-based energy sources, etc. So I think this is a big challenge, and we need to keep
Yes.
brainstorming and sensitizing the society that a lot more is done.
Yeah, thank you very much, Imamsu, for your candid opinion on the recent developments and how the leaders are they are lacking in seriousness in addressing the climate issue, keeping in mind the some of the countries where population nearly 30 to 35% of the population live in poverty. We are really endangering their lives and livelihood with the actions and policies we are pursuing right now. And I think rich can adapt, but the poor, as you rightly mentioned, the climate temperature in Delhi, how people forced to live under the some of flyovers. This is really scary, and we are running out of time, and we are moving towards the suggestion or recommendation or solution part. And do you think that given the uh, inadequacy of policy response by the government and also the environmental governance is very poor given the programs and also allocation, do you think that NGOs and people can raise their rights and they can come forward to form a climate club of things, and they want green growth, they want just transition, they want the sustainable development, and the policy should be more focused on sustainable development goals like that. And what is the role of society, and what is the role of NGOs and civil society and society in this regard? Do you have 1 minute? One can suggest one point and one by one, and the same order I invited you for the panel discussion. Kindly, with start with Madam Professor Shamla, then you can continue.
Thank you. My suggestion is that, if we have already, been told by so many well-known economists that, India is going to have a very difficult situation of even reaching middle-income countries level, and forget about the high-income countries level. So what should we actually be looking at? We should be looking at whether we can safeguard the lives and livelihoods of our people. And instead of chasing a dream which is impossible to achieve within this century, that is for sure. Instead of that, why can't we look at, what are the kind of, goals that are achievable by us? Because, even though we may say that the state has to do adequate, and, but the national budget is also a policy document. It is not just, it shows a certain amount of direction. It shows what is it that, you are considering important, and it sets the stage for the rest of the states to adopt. So if you are going to say that, okay, we are going to be chasing an impossible dream, and we are going to leave the rest of the poor, the rich, the middle class, whoever it is, at their at their fate, so that they can face the climate challenges, and they can do whatever they want, and their state government will give them some compensation, or they will create the necessity infrastructure that is required. That I don't think is the correct way to go. I think even the union government should reflect in its policy that we care, and how, whether it may be in the farming sector, whether it may be in the urban sector, or in the mobility, or in the industry. We really need to show that people are first, and what are the ways in which, you see, even the UNEP has come out with a report that the IPCC has been very, very conservative in the way it has been predicting, and in fact things are happening, and if they are even predicting that within 30-40 years the AMOC can shut off, which means that we will have even much greater problems in the northern hemisphere. So we have to first and foremost protect the people and give them the kind of lives and livelihoods that we can afford, rather than chase
Thank you.
a impossible dream.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Shyamlamani. And now, Himamsu. Sorry, Soumya Datta, I think. Yeah,
Okay,
Soumya.
I'll just quickly come. See,
Yeah.
We have very clearly our responsibility of mitigation is there, but it's not primary.
Yeah.
Because our historical responsibility is comparatively much lower. That do not completely leave us, but that's much lesser. We had created a whole network of state action plans on climate change. We had created in many places heat action plans in the cities and states. These were supposed to be starting in 2009-10, after the National Action Plan on Climate Change, when the state action plans were started, the first round. The idea was the entire climate impacts will be mapped. There will be multiple sectors will be brought into this, and which was done. Each state action plan on climate change, if you look at, it had 8 to 14 sectors. And these were supposed to take care of climate change impact and making agriculture sustainable, making water sector sustainable. All of these are there. Unfortunately, these were not supported budgetarily. These became documents to be revised every 5 years, not to be supported fully in budgetary terms or even seed funding. So we already have some kind of base to start our work with. We have a knowledge base after 2020, which the Ministry of Arts Science, the report that they released, because the IPCC report, you must understand, this is a global report, so it's not as granular. But the IITM prepared report by Ministry of Arts Science, it's much more granular on India. So we know what kind of impact in which geographies are going to increase by roughly what amount. So these two can be married. Proper allocation and proper action plans need to be worked out, part of which we know are in the public domain. And that needs to be supported fully. And apart from that, I have last comment. It's not only the government. There are a lot of civil society initiatives which are already happening. I personally am working with the Fish Workers Forum, National Fish Workers Forum in the coastal areas. I am working with the National Street Vendors, the National Hawkers Federation, to build up their capacity to build up their resilience to heat wave and heat index and urban flooding. But these NGO or small group efforts will always be limited because they don't have the resources to reach out to very, very large scale. This can only if the
Thank you.
government has to accept and escalate this to a national scale.
Thank you. Professor, Mr. Soumya. And now may I call upon Himanshu Shekhar. Himanshu?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still your voice is feeble, but still you go ahead.
That's better, yeah. Sir, essentially,
Can you, I think your volume is reduced. Can you give more volume? Increase the volume?
is it better now?
Better now. Yes.
Is it better? Oh, it was down. Okay. Yeah. So thank you very much. You see, we have enough laws. Whenever there is a crisis in Delhi, either during heat wave or we saw Delhi getting flooded, suddenly once we revisit the policies and laws, we find that there are lots of gaps in the implementation of the policies and the laws that we have. For instance, when I went to cover the Kashmir floods in 2014, I was shocked to know that the Disaster Management Act was passed in 2005, but 9 years later, the Jammu Kashmir government had not even set up a SDRF, the State Disaster Response Force. It's only now when there is a new disaster management bill that has come up, which makes it mandatory for states to set up an SDRF. So there are lots of fault lines in terms of how seriously we are actually implementing the policies and laws and the action plans that we make. And the second, I think, is there is a gap that we see. As a reporter, I can tell you that I also interact and interview lawmakers in Delhi, in Parliament, in NDMA, in NDRF. But when I go to the ground, I see people are helplessly struggling with the problem on the ground. There seems to be a big gap in terms of how effectively the policy makers are actually connecting with people, with climate vulnerable communities on the ground. And the third thing I want to say is the mapping of the problem. In Sikkim, for instance, a report in Parliament by the Parliamentary Standing Committee said that the glacial lakes, the majority of the glacial lakes in the Himalayan region have not even been mapped. An official said that we don't even know that more than 90% of the glacial lakes in what condition they are. It's only when a disaster happens and a glacial lake outburst happens that we all wake up, oh, climate change is affecting the Himalayas, the glacial lakes are breaking down. And the fourth thing I think is weaving a vision of disaster risk reduction vision in the projects and development plans that we have. If we just look at the Chamoli incident, unfortunately, around 104 NTPC professionals are still missing, and the plant was completely washed away when the Chamoli glacial lake outburst happened. There were warnings, but those warnings were ignored by the state governments, essentially on the ground. And the outcome we all know. So we know very little about the state in which our glaciers are. We know very little because we haven't launched a large-scale study. It's only recently, a few months back, that a team of officials from state government, NDMA, and paramilitary forces were sent to study glacial lakes. And they could study only 8 glacial lakes. And we have hundreds of glacial lakes in the Himalayan region. So I think we have to identify a problem. We have to first study the problem.
Correct.
So we need to launch large-scale studies to actually get primary data as to what has been the impact of climate change, let's say, in the Himalayan region. And once you have the primary data, then you know where the action has to be initiated. At the moment, we don't have the primary data. And if you don't have the primary data, you don't know which are the problem areas. So from policy making to policy implementation to effective action on the ground, I think we need to work far more proactively. And we need a people's movement where actually we include people who are living in climate vulnerable areas. Climate vulnerable communities have to be weaved in the policy making processes. And we have to include them in the implementation of any such climate adaptation strategy? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Imamsu. Thank you. Thank you so much. You have highlighted a very important issue on glacier lakes that is very much required. And we cannot face one more disasters like that in Sikkim that happened. Now may I request Debaltio?
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah,
please.
thank you. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, please.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. So actually, Professor Krishna, you asked a very relevant question, the role of civil society. And I'm very
Yeah.
critical about it
Hmm.
because, we have to ask ourselves, like, as a civil society, are we asking relevant questions? Like, when you talk about laws and policies, who will show the mirror to the government? Who will speak about the issues? Issues are very relevant. Now, see
Yeah.
the misplaced priorities. The Andaman Nicobar Development Project. We have this now whole river interlinking against all the scientific, studies saying it is not feasible. So this kind of issues we need to talk about. We need to write about them, and I think the Indian civil society is not doing enough, in terms of law and policy. And also, we can't blame the entirely civil society. We also have to see that the civil society depends on two, three things. One is the philanthropic funding which they receive. So I think in India, the research on policy and advocacy kind of thing is not that much matured. And secondly, the government is also not very welcoming. Like, if you ask to any big or small organization, there is enough information. I don't think we have lack of any data or information to do this thing. What we need is like firm political will and enforcement on ground and to make the law. But what we are seeing, the laws are being diluted. And I just now Somita sir wrote that disaster management bill is amendment is passed. It's regressive. Like, to go in these details, you need expertise. And then also government should listen to you. It's not that, if someone is writing something which is not very sound music to the ears of some bureaucrat, then they fear of, like, when I speak to people, like very big organization, they all say that, this is very sensitive information. Okay, and we have to be careful. So, this kind of thing, we have to first work on that, like, as a democracy, like, you gave example of Trump. Now, when Trump withdrew from the UN the climate commitment, the Bloomberg came up, and so there's committed to fund the some shortfall in this climate change. And that beauty of democracy is that you can have diverse views. So I think we, as a civil society, as a think tanks, and as a other organization, we have to talk to each other. We cannot work in silos. And mainstream organization, big organization, and the grassroots organization, and people like academic institution, everyone has to talk together, and government also has to listen to people and take feedback on the these things. Otherwise, like, these issues cannot be just left as it is, because there are too many competing interests and markets will take over. So government's duty is also to support free market and also put the checks and balances so that it doesn't become unsustainable. So yeah, that's from my
Yeah,
end.
thank you. Making a very interesting point for to go ahead. Now, may I request Prarthana? Are you there? If is not there, shall I call upon Baurin? Baurin? I think Baurin is also not there. Okay, let me conclude. A very interesting, very fascinating discussion we had about the how climate change and it is bringing havoc and also threatening the very livelihood and also the existence of human beings apart from biodiversity. The policies which are being promoted, they are more into economic development rather than addressing the climate issues. This clearly shows that there is a huge gap between policy and action in order to address the climate change and just transition and reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. The target which we are fixing, they are really unrealistic in nature and they may not be achieved with these policies, the current policies. The second thing is that even though there are various state action plan on climate change, and they are just mentioned by Imansu and others, they give only the idea of the changing environment, changing climate change. But in order to address those recommendations in the state action plan, there is no clear-cut climate budget. So therefore, I have been working on this area, and especially for Karnataka State Action Plan on Climate Change, and to provide state climate budget for this action plan on climate change. But in reality and practice, there is no much governance with respect to environmental governance is forthcoming. In this way, what we can understand here is that the government needs to pursue environmental policies and also sustainable developmental goals with all seriousness, because the livelihood of the millions of people is going to be in the hands of the government. So they may also create more poverty in terms of, if you don't address the cost of environment in terms of climate change, which will affect the livelihood, especially the farmers. In this regard, the policies of the at the international level and also at the national level and at the state level, they should consider the climate change is a serious issue, and they need to be addressed at an on a war footing basis, and without which we just cannot tackle the climate change. It is fast running. We just cannot catch it in the coming days. Therefore, being a um, uh, so the government should be responsible for all these disasters in the coming days, and they should be responsible for the society. They have elected these governments. So I stop here, and I request the organizers to take it forward.
Yes, sir.
Now,
Thank you, sir.
yeah,
So before moving forward, I will ask to ask, like, anyone have any questions or comment they would like to share?
yeah.
Okay, so there are no questions. So okay, with this, I would like to proceed to formal vote of thanks. As we come to
Let
the
me
end of
thank first the IMPRI for giving me this opportunity, and also conducting every year this awareness panel discussion, and that will certainly help understanding the perspective from various perspective on the budget and also the environment. It is a great program. I thank especially the Arjun, Dr. Arjun, for having me here. Please go ahead, madam.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
I
So as we
thank you,
come
thank
to
all
the
the
end of
panelists for their very wonderful discussion on the issues. Thank you, every one of you. Yes, please go ahead, madam.
Yes, sir. Thank you. As we come to the end of today's discussion, I, Sana Ansari, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development. I would like to thank all of you for attending today's deliberation, a panel discussion on Environment and Union Budget 2025 and 26. We are grateful to our chair for this session, Professor Krishna Rajji, our esteemed panelists, Mr. Soumya Datta, Professor Shyam Malamani, Mr. Dev Aditya Sinha, Ms. Pratna Bora, Mr. Himanshu Shekhar, and Ms. Braveen Kandhari for taking out their valuable time and taking part in this discussion and enlightening us. We thank all our participants who have raised important questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We are grateful if you're watching us later on the YouTube channel or listening to us on various podcasts or reading our publication. You may also find more thematic events or book discussion under IMPRI Web Policy Talks series. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning as well. Wishing you a very good day. Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to IMPRI. Thank you, Professor Krishnaraj, for conducting a wonderful session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, madam. Thank you.
sir.
Thank you, one
Krishna
and all.
sir. Thank you, Krishna sir. Thank you.